What's going on, guys? I wanted to do this little video here to talk about this little single shot and how I mounted this. I got a lot of guys asking me for a lot more details into how I mounted this, and basically I had some other guys give me some flack as to why I put a red dot on this survival shotgun or survival firearm. So I figured I would address some of those questions and concerns in this video here. So first of all, the philosophy of use with this little single shot here is essentially I wanted to turn it into and convert it strictly to shoot either, say, 9mm or 22 LR. What I've effectively done is made this a dedicated 9mm or dedicated 22 LR firearm with the option to shoot 12 gauge loads out of it. So 12 gauge, a single shot 12 gauge is not that fun to shoot at all by itself. However, a single shot 9mm is very relaxing at the range to just sit there and plink with that now expensive ammo. This gives you the opportunity to slow down, take your shots, and then just enjoy being able to shoot 9mm if you have some, or 22 LR for that matter. So when I basically put these adapters in here, I convert this to a dedicated 22 LR firearm. This is where the red dot comes into play, because with a 22 LR firearm, what's its intended purpose? Well, to gather small game. You want the precision not in a bead sight, but more rather in, say, a red dot or a magnified optic, whatever you have. Being able to do that and use a red dot gives you the precision needed for small game to be able to do it consistently. I have shown these adapters at 100 yards accuracy doing almost just as well as a dedicated 22 LR firearm. They're very, very accurate for what they are and their intended purpose is. So to be able to put this barrel inside of this barrel and convert it basically to a 22 LR firearm makes this so much more relaxing to shoot and so much more effective as a small game gathering device that doesn't have the huge recoil of a 12 gauge, which also devastates any kind of game that you're pointing at if you're at any kind of close distance. So to have this red dot on here again allows for that precision shot and not to just basically tear apart the game. And to be able to step all the way up to 12 gauge for bear if needed. There you go. That's the philosophy behind this very relaxing and fun to use simplistic tool. So as far as how I mounted this, guys were asking me for a lot more detail on how I did this. This will work on almost any single shot 12 gauge, but we're going to go ahead and focus on the Midland in particular. This does apply and will translate well to any other 12 gauge single shot as long as you have a forend that comes off pretty easily. Typically it's just one screw, or in this case it is the sling stud that comes right off. There is going to be some trimming up needed on your forend here, which of course is to be expected, but it's much easier to do so on, say, these polymer nylon type forends right here, because it's very easy to trim them up using, say, a Dremel. You can do this on wood as well. I actually have a how-to video on how to install one of these, so I won't go into so much detail, but just some of the detail involved with doing this in general. As you can see with the trimming, all I did was test fit, trim, test fit, trim, test fit, trim, until I got to the point where I could close it up, and it gave it a very nice clean look to it. Clean in my opinion anyway. What this mount effectively does as well, for the guys that were giving me crap about putting a red dot or an electronic on a survival type shotgun. Now first of all, this is a survival type shotgun second. This is more a fun gun first. So what this mount also allows to do for the survival situation is that there's a trench right here, and I can effectively use this as a rear sight now with my front bead diving right down in between here. Now this is non-adjustable, however, this is a point of reference for a point of aim for a point of impact. Perfect. Iron sights, drop back to iron sights. I've effectively made this better than what it was by putting iron sights on it instead of just a bead. It would be great if it was adjustable, but it's not, and this is what I have. No tool is exactly perfect. However, let's get back into mounting this and some of the details that need to be addressed if you're ever going to do this, if you have no familiarity with it whatsoever. If you take note right here to the way this is bolted down on here, there is a taper to this barrel, which means once you screw this and tighten this all the way down, on the top, more likely than not, your rail is going to be pointing slightly downward because of the taper of the barrel. This is where your red dot comes in, to where you can adjust that shot back up because it will be pointing slightly down. This is not noticeable whatsoever when you're shooting, and it's not noticeable whatsoever if you're using this just for iron sights. Iron sights. This mount is the I guess you could say the mount you should probably be using, because it has a nice big gap right here. There are there's an overabundance of styles of mounts. Basically, these are flashlight mounts, and I'll have it linked down there in the description box down below. This is the mount that is ideal to use for this situation, because you have to clear this lug as you slide this whole thing down. This gigantic gap right here is what you'll be looking for when you go to purchase yours, and make sure that you're looking for this exact one. These side rails are almost unavoidable. A lot of these come with 3 rails all the way around it for, you know, light mounts. They're not made as intended optic mounts. They work for this situation, and they work great for like 22LR, and even on the recoil of a 12 gauge. Now, typically how I would used to mount these is, I can't really do that on this Midland, but I would mount it in contact with the rear lug and just trim as needed from there, so that whenever this 12 gauge would recoil, there is no chance whatsoever of this mount moving forward as recoil wants it to do, because it's butted up against this mount right here. Can't do that on the Midland. However, this has been doing just fine, and I've been shooting 12 gauge shots out of it with no problem, and it does not move at all. So again, I can drop back to 0 to use this as my 22LR, or say my 9mm, no problem at all returning to 0 after shooting 12 gauge out of this. But take note, as far as to what mount you should be using, this one right here seems to work just the best. And in particular on the Midland, you cannot butt this all the way up against the receiver, even though it would clean up the look a lot better, because of this little part right here. This needs to move, and if you make contact with it, your firearm won't function as it should. So other than completely recreating what I did to mount this, which I'll have a video on how to mount a red dot down there in the description box down below, those are the more detailed, that's the more detailed information that I can give you right there as far as to how to do this. It's really a very straightforward and simple little project. And getting this to be level and straight isn't really that hard, because you're typically using the top of your receiver as a reference point, shooting straight down the middle of this and into your bead sight. And that is exactly how I lined this all up, to get it as straight as possible, so that I didn't have a canted, you know, optic mount. And so that's basically the gist of the entirety of this whole little project here, and the idea behind it, as far as why I'm putting a red dot on here, because again, this is a fun gun at the range first, and a survival shotgun second, because I'll be using this more at the range just for fun than a survival shotgun. However, testing it and using it at the range ensures me that this will work for its intended purpose, because the simplicity behind it. Putting a 30,000 hour red dot on here makes perfect sense, because if it ever came to the point where I actually ran out of battery life, because life is that extreme at this point, I can take this off, drop back to iron sights, and still use the 12 gauge 22LR or whatever it may be by using this rear iron sight. Works just fine for it. So let's hope that we never get down to that level of severity in a survival situation, prolonged that long. However, I feel like this would be a good setup still, because it is 12 gauge and you can use these adapters and whatnot. So I hope this video helped you guys out that had all of those questions for me. This is about the best I can do for you right there. Again, I'll have that video linked on how to mount a red dot. This idea typically can work for almost any single shot 12 gauge. I'll have that link down there in the description box down below. Hope that answered you guys' questions. If it helped you out at all, feel free to hit that like button down there, and we will catch you guys on the next video.